A recently published book, Coming Into Land, shares the stories, the memoirs of Wing Commander Bill Malins, DFC. Bill grew up on a farm near Bicester, and a couple of weeks ago came in to share with me some of the stories that are covered in this rather special and intimate memoir. Stories that recounted life on the farm as a child, his first real acknowledgement of the RAF base nearby that his farm used to service, and indeed a career in the RAF himself during the Second World War. And in fact, it was as a young boy working on the farm that Bill first became aware of what the RAF were doing here in Oxfordshire. This afternoon we have the chance to hear some of those memories, starting with his earliest recollection of his own father, who was away serving during the First World War when Bill was born, leaving his mother in charge.
She was in fact running the farm. At that time would have been a total of 300-acre farm, giving orders to there were 3 or 4 farm workers, and my grandfather, who had business interests in London, wasn't able to spend very much time at the farm. So for a lot of the war, my mother was doing her best to run the farm.
Your father didn't return until 1919. What are your earliest memories of childhood at the farm and his return?
I mentioned in my book, I can remember him picking me up, this soldier in a very rough khaki uniform, which is very rough for my sensitive childish skin. And he lifted me up to look at the sow and about 11 piglets. It was a Oxfordshire sandy and black. That was my first recollection. And he had a steel helmet, which he came home with, which served as a flower basket in the porch of the farmhouse for a few years.
What are some of the highlights you remember of that time, and indeed some of the difficult times your family experienced?
All happy memories of tagging along with the farm workers. Farm workers would put me on the horses that were going out to work in the fields, going out to plough. I can remember waiting to be lifted up onto the back of a horse, and later on, I suppose 2 or 3 years later, I was able to go take a ride onto my horse to the field where they were ploughing, and then they'd take me off the back of the horse and I'd run home. Within a very short time, I found that my desire for riding anything meant that I could creep up on a sheep lying in the field and get on their backs. And a sheep was very easy to ride because you got plenty to hang on. And I can remember getting on the back of a cow that was lying down in the suckler cow yard where the cows and calves were lying. And I got on the back of this animal, and that caused a furore because they thought I would fall off and break my neck. And I recall that one of the men, using a hay fork, they put the tines of the hay fork between the horns. All the animals were horned in those days. And he was able to lock it so that it stood still, and they were able to remove me from the animal's back.
It was as a boy on the farm that Bill's awareness of flying in the RAF first came about, delivering milk to the nearby airbase in 1925. But when war did break out in 1939, what did he imagine his role would entail?
Well, I knew exactly what it would be. We would, within about a fortnight of war breaking out, we moved to France to cooperate and provide intelligence and reconnaissance on the front of the 2nd British Army Corps, under General Sir Alan Brooke, later Lord Alan Brooke, who became Chief of the Imperial General Staff when Churchill took over in 1914. My squadron, or part of it, we moved right up into near Brussels to an advanced landing ground so that we could complete reconnaissances ahead of the British Army, and we would be watching all the Germans as they invaded Holland and Belgium.
At the end of the war, Bill was offered a commission with the RAF to take charge of a lecture tour to all RAF airfields overseas, dealing with accident prevention. This meant further time away from his family and the farm, but it would also guarantee a home posting for him after the tour, and he took to that reason to take up the offer. Bill returned to his lord's farm following that tour and continued to work the land through the 50s and 60s before handing over responsibility. But as Bill reflects now on the future of his farm, it's a very different picture from the one of its past. All memories that remain strong for the 95-year-old Bill.
The future for Lord's Farm is that they're going to build the eco-town on it. Yes, so they want up to 400 acres of it. So the old farm that I'd kept going and I loved, I've often thought that it was a life of toil, tears and sweat to the apologies to Mr. Churchill, but ameliorated by life in a happy family with my sisters. Going along the streams in the spring, looking for the wild violets, pale blue, blue and even white violets that grew along the edges of the streams. And the all the wildflowers, buttercups, celandines, that was all the pleasures that we got. Then in the autumn, of course, there was blackberrying, mushrooming. Wonderful life.
Bill Malins sharing some of his memories that are covered in his book, Coming Into Land, the Memoirs of Wing Commander Bill Malins, published now by Memoirs.